Hello, I'm Nathaniel James, and this is the third installment of Philanthrogeek Exchange, where we'll be talking to effective innovators in the field of philanthropy. And today, June 10th, we're joined by Sarah Lange of New Era in Worcester, Massachusetts. New Era is a nonprofit consultancy, and Sarah's joining us today to talk about big trends for the nonprofit, the fundraising nonprofit. So welcome, Sarah.
Thanks, Nathaniel. It's great to be here.
So can you introduce us to what you do with New Era?
Sure. New Era is where nonprofit is a tax status, not a business model. So what we do is we work with nonprofits to integrate best practices across fundraising, strategic planning, board development, communications, marketing, and leadership. And we really try to integrate as many business practices as possible to help them really get to the next stage of their development.
Great. So what are the one or two biggest trends you're seeing for the nonprofit world in today's giving and fundraising landscape?
Well, you know, I see nonprofits really struggling to make ends meet, even more than they used to be ever since 2008. And one of the habits I think is really catching up with the nonprofit sector is their dependency on grants. And so I work really hard with my clients to help bolster their individual giving programs and increase communication with their donors and use other tools and strategies to really increase the number of individual dollars coming into their organization so that they can meet their clients' needs.
So is that how do changes in the field of philanthropy on the giving institution side, how does that push the nonprofit to be less dependent on grants?
Well, so grant makers depend on the stock market for their distributions, and when the stock market doesn't perform well, they have less money to give out, and also a lot of grant makers have changed the direction, so maybe they're giving to fewer areas or not as, maybe they're changing to only getting applications that they solicit. So what's happening is nonprofits are getting fewer dollars from funders, and so it's very hard for the nonprofit then to figure out how to make up that gap, and that's why I focus a lot with them on individual giving. But one of the things I really think that funders, whether it's a corporate foundation or a private or a community foundation, I feel like we really need to actually step up our investment in nonprofit development, because if we really want nonprofits to be able to stand on their own 2 feet, we really need to give them the tools to have the time to invest in donor relations programs, really get their individual donations up, which of course takes time because that's all about building positive, strong relationships. And eventually in a couple of years you could get nonprofits to the point where they have such a robust individual donor program that it would release their reliance on grants, and then the funder could then turn around and invest that money in another nonprofit to help them get to the same stage. But it does take time and does require an investment in development. And the expectation out in the nonprofit sector seems to be that you should do more with less when it comes to development. And if you look at actually how development works, 80% of the dollars in this country that come into the nonprofit sector are from individuals. So when you have that big a sector of philanthropic dollars coming from people, it only makes sense to help nonprofits understand and build their systems so that they can reap the reward from individual donors. Because that's where the money is, right? So why not help them figure out how to get it?
So in some of our earlier conversations, one-on-one, you were talking about the shift in philanthropy from not the individual donor, but the foundations, from a charity model to an investment model or strategic philanthropy model. How does that play into the world and the challenges and opportunities nonprofits face?
Well, philanthropy used to be very local. So individuals in a community would support local charities, and now that we live in a globalized economy, philanthropy has gone global as well. You've got people donating to the tsunami in Southeast Asia, or after the earthquake in Haiti, or investing in Kiva, which is microfinance. So people have literally a world of options when it comes to giving. Plus, there's 1.5 million nonprofits right here in the United States. So there's tons of philanthropic choices. And so when your local dollars leave your local community, nonprofits are left kind of wondering, okay, well, where do our dollars come from? And foundations, if they're not able to fill the gap, then that just sort of leaves the nonprofit hanging with a gap in their budget that they don't know how to fill. And this is particularly true for smaller nonprofits, that are already struggling to make ends meet. If they miss a grant or two, then they could have to close their doors, and then the people they were serving are kind of standing there on the sidewalk going, okay, now what? So it's really, the landscape has really changed, and nonprofits need to figure out how to catch up with this investment model of philanthropy. They can't just assume that people know that they're out there doing good work. They have to actually push communications, and social media makes it really easy to do that. But I think that's just a habit nonprofits really haven't developed yet.
Which habit? Around foundations or around individual donor relations?
Well, around individual donor relations, but also the communication that's needed to maintain those relationships. If you have 5,000 donors on your database, you can't possibly have relationships with all of those 5,000 people. So tools like social media or MailChimp or Constant Contact make it so easy to build relationships with donors, let potential donors know about the great work you're doing, give them an inside look in your organization, share those heartwarming stories, because people are giving nonprofits money because they want to help the people that need that nonprofit's help. So a lot of us can't address big issues like hunger or homelessness on our own. So we invest in organizations that can do it on our behalf. So, it's really important for us to understand as donors, what difference is my money making? And not necessarily, does my $25 save a hungry child? But, I want to know that I'm contributing, right? So I need to hear from my favorite nonprofits about how does my contribution make a difference in terms of making the world a better place to be in. So the tools are out there, and I think nonprofits just have not gotten in the habit of using them.
One thing I'm hearing is it puts a nonprofit, especially not smaller nonprofits, under this pressure where on one hand, if they are going to interact with the contemporary foundation that has an investment model and an outcomes-based model, that they need the data, so they need to somehow become data experts and even determining causality in work can be challenged. So I'm curious what you think about that. But at the same time, if they're engaging and growing their relationship with individual donors, that may be more of a heart-based communication, and storytelling and branding play into that. So those are a lot of pressures or a lot of requirements, and they're two different approaches to even understanding what one's nonprofit is doing. So how can nonprofits grow into both of those demands?
Yeah, well, I think the first requirement is being open-minded, being open to new ideas, new ways of doing business, and that's really what we try to introduce our clients to. But yeah, I mean, they do have to start tracking data, but when you're being asked to do evaluation and you don't have a background in evaluation, and you're sitting at a nonprofit and you're a staff person, you can't afford a professional evaluator. So, oh my gosh, what does that mean? If I'm doing counseling with somebody, what I'm talking to them about may not catch on for 2 years, or it may not impact them for 6 months. So you can't follow these people once they leave. So, how do you do that measuring while they're with you? And I feel like nonprofits really need a lot of support and training and help to understand how to do impactful evaluation with their clients while their clients are with them, so that they can track their outcomes and report those outcomes. And that's inspiring to people when you're seeing, oh my gosh, they look at this woman, she came in with her small children, she was homeless, now she's in an apartment. That's great. So yes, you can count those numbers, but also telling Sally's story is also very important. So again, it's developing these new habits. How do you evaluate? Nonprofits, and I think this is where foundations could make a huge difference, is nonprofits are not in the habit of evaluating their work. And so how do you help them do that in a way that's cost effective? So that means that their existing staff needs to be trained somehow. What do the tools look like? How often do you evaluate? What do you do with the data? How do you even do data analysis? I mean, that's an entire graduate program right there. So how do you break that down into sort of like pragmatic training that you can then disseminate to the nonprofits that you're now asking to evaluate? So I feel like while I'm happy to see more foundations asking for evaluation, I feel like they're the ones that really need and are in a position to provide that training and support and technical assistance that nonprofits need to deliver on that front. So I think that's a huge gap.
Right. It seems like, in some cases, this may not work for every sector or every program area, but you could have a positive return on investing on these two capacities of, building evaluative and data capacity while also helping nonprofits translate that data into the compelling stories for individual donors. So maybe then the next cycles, they're less reliant on their foundation grants. Do you see that happening? Have you seen an example of that kind of investment?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them. So, for example, we had a client down in Connecticut who we worked with over a period of 18 months, and they're a domestic violence sexual assault organization, and they were really looking to, over the long haul, increase their dollars from donors, and so we actually went through a pretty rigorous process where we really looked at communications, we looked at messaging, we looked at rebranding, and all those things went into place. And so they started doing these individual social media campaigns, and the response was phenomenal. So like one of their emails started out by saying, "Women and children are living in fear." Like, that's pretty edgy, and it took them a while to get used to that kind of language, but in this day of social media where people are getting possibly hundreds of emails a day, you have to sort of like hit them up front and say, "I have something important to say, pay attention."
I'm guessing that the model's email subject before would have been like, "Please give this here," or what is the before and after? You said the after, so what is the contrast?
Well, a lot of times it'll just say from agency X. There's like, they don't even necessarily have the social media experience to understand how important subject lines are. So, we all learn as we go with social media, but they just don't understand how that the first few words in your subject line make all the difference as to whether somebody even opens your email, let alone reads it. So, teaching them the techniques of having a powerful subject line, having a powerful opening statement, a few seconds later saying something else that's powerful, and then ending with a call to action, because you don't want to just communicate for no reason at all. If you're going to put the energy into communicating, you want them to do something. So is it a call to your legislator? Is it, we need to raise $10,000 by the end of the month? Is it come to our event or whatever? You want people to do something at the end of your email. So just teaching them those tools and techniques makes a huge difference in terms of the response rate, the engagement rate, how people react to them, interact with them. It's made a really big difference.
Yeah. So 1.5 million nonprofits in the U.S., and they all are going through some evolutionary pressures right now. Are you optimistic?
I'm super optimistic, but I'm chronically perky. So I love the nonprofit sector. I feel like the whole reason our quality of life in the United States is so great is because of the nonprofit sector. I mean, think about life without things like social service agencies, hospitals, universities, museums, symphonies. Like, those are all nonprofits. And when you think about the differential quality of life here in the United States as compared to some other countries, where the rubber meets the road is in the nonprofit sector. That's what makes America great. And I'm going to do everything I can for the rest of my life to really help nonprofits go out there and be amazing, because they're doing amazing work. They just don't always know how to sort of like, promote that out to the community and say, "Hey, we're doing amazing things. Come," and invite them to join us. Join us in what we're doing, because that's really what it is. People want to give, people want to get involved, people want to make the world a better place. I really believe in the intrinsic goodness of the human human beings. And I think sometimes nonprofits just don't know how to open the doors and invite people in.
So we're running out of time, and so I just want to say, do you have anything that you want to share before, and then I have one last question for you.
Yeah, I just think that I see a lot of really hopeful signs out there that nonprofits are really embracing new ideas and new ways of doing business. And I would encourage any nonprofits that are out there that are struggling to just really open themselves up to doing something outside the box or different, because the world of philanthropy and nonprofit management has changed forever. It ain't ever going to be the way it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So, as painful as change can be, or as scary or as uncertain, the sooner nonprofits kind of just open themselves up to these new ideas and make some of these changes, I think the better off they're going to be, and they're going to see the changes happen pretty quickly once they do put those strategies into place.
Great. So I know one of your main focuses on the nonprofit relationship to the large donor, but primarily, we're talking to folks in the institutional philanthropic sector, and the question I'm asking everyone in this interview series is, how do you hope philanthropy, the institutional side of philanthropy, will be different in 25 years?
I would really love to see philanthropy foundations, corporate foundations, really be more nimble and responsive, to really know what their community needs, and to be nimble and responsive, and to be able to put strategies and tools and supports and grants into place to really help nonprofits thrive. Because, like I said, nonprofits are really making a huge difference. So, rather than giving out all these program grants, which are nice, it'd be great to see more capacity building money out there so that nonprofits can put together a strategic plan, can do rebranding, can get a social media marketing program up off the ground. That kind of funding just isn't out there right now, and I feel like in order for nonprofits to make it through the end of this century and into the next one, those are all tools they need to integrate. And so I think foundations could play a huge role by investing in development and investing in the sort of infrastructure things like marketing, social media, so that's that whole capacity building piece. I think that foundations could make a significant difference in.
Great. Well, as you see examples of that and positive changes, I hope you'll stay in touch. And thank you very much for your time today, and for all the great work you're doing with your clients.
Well, thanks. It's been great to be here.
All right.